The red earth of Aduka village was already baking under the morning sun as the distant, sharp clanging of the school gate signaled the final minutes of grace. Zainab and Tracy were a single blur of blue uniforms, their breath coming in ragged hitches as they raced against the inevitable. They had walked this path together since childhood, but beneath the same fabric, two different hearts beat, one fueled by the quiet pulse of empathy, the other by the sharp, jagged edges of ambition. "Move, Zainab. Madam Rose doesn't care about excuses, only results," Tracy hissed, her eyes fixed on the horizon of the schoolyard. To her, every second wasted was a step toward a public shaming she refused to endure. But the path was no longer clear. Slumped against the gnarled roots of a massive Ioko tree was a figure of pure exhaustion. An elderly woman, her spine bent like a bow, struggled with a mountain of firewood that seemed intent on crushing her into the dust. Her hands shook as she reached out, her voice a fragile thread in the morning heat. Tracy didn't just ignore her, she recoiled as if the woman's poverty was a contagion. With a sharp, verbal strike that cut deeper than any physical blow, Tracy demanded the filthy obstacle move aside. She chose the clock. She chose her status. Zainab, however, felt the halt in her soul. Ignoring Tracy's screams of betrayal, she knelt. As she heaved the rough, splintered wood onto her own head, the weight nearly buckled her knees. Tracy sprinted toward her future of rose, leaving Zainab to walk a narrow, silent path into the bush, carrying a burden that would soon transform into a blessing. The splintered edges of the firewood dug into Zainab's shoulder, a sharp reminder of the cost of her hesitation. Tracy's footsteps were already a fading rhythm against the sun-baked earth, her blue uniform shrinking into a speck of desperate ambition. She didn't look back. Not once. The bond of a decade had been severed by the simple, trembling plea of a stranger. Zainab gasped, her neck muscles straining as the full weight of the bundle settled. Beside her, the old woman, Mom Kiru, let out a breath that sounded like a prayer. Her eyes were milky with age but held a depth that made Zainab's heart skip a beat. They weren't just the eyes of a beggar, they were the eyes of a witness. "You will be late, my daughter," the old woman whispered, her voice like wine through dry grass. "Your friend, she was right about the Rose. Madam Rose is not a woman who forgives. Rose cannot mend a broken bone, Mama," Zainab replied, her voice strained but steady. "If I am punished for helping you, then it is a punishment I will wear with pride. Let us go. The sun is getting higher." As they turned away from the main road and onto the narrow, overgrown path leading into the thicket, the sounds of the village began to die away. The distant clanging of the school bell reached them one last time, a final, mournful toll, confirming Zainab's fate. She was officially late. She was officially a target for disgrace. Yet, as she walked deeper into the green silence, the weight on her head felt strangely different. It was heavy, yes, but it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a test. Life often asks us to choose between the fast road to success and the slow path of sacrifice. If you believe that a kind heart is worth more than a seat in a crowded classroom, perhaps you'll find it in yourself to stay with Zainab on this journey and subscribe to see where her footsteps lead. The path narrowed until the bushes clawed at Zainab's uniform, leaving streaks of green stain on her white socks. Finally, they emerged into a clearing that felt as though time had forgotten it. The compound was a skeletal remains of a home. The mud walls were cracked, the thatch roof was balding, and the yard was swallowed by a carpet of rotten leaves and stagnant dust. "This is where I rest my head," Mom Kiru said, leaning heavily on her walking stick. Zainab lowered the firewood, her muscles screaming in relief as the bundle hit the earth with a dull thud. She looked around, her chest tightening with a sudden, sharp empathy. No human being should live in such silence, in such decay. Without a word, Zainab didn't turn back toward the school. Instead, she found an old broom made of palm fronds leaning against a withered orange tree. She began to sweep. She swept away the layers of neglect, her school uniform damp with sweat, her hands blistering. She washed the few blackened pots she found in the corner of the hut. She fetched water from the nearby stream to scrub the stoop. Mom Kiru sat on a low wooden stool, watching Zainab with a silent, piercing intensity. When the sun reached its zenith, Zainab finished. The compound breathed again. It was then that Mom Kiru stood up, her movements no longer appearing quite so frail. She entered the dim interior of her hut and returned carrying something wrapped in a pristine white cloth. "Because you did not just carry my wood, but you cared for my dignity," the woman said, unwrapping a small, ivory-white native pot. "This is not a vessel for water, Zainab. It is a vessel for destiny. Touch it 3 times when your heart is pure and your need is great, and the world will provide. But remember, goodness is a secret that the greedy will try to steal." Zainab clutched the cool ceramic of the pot to her chest. She wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but Mom Kiru simply placed a hand over Zainab's eyes. The air around her shifted. A sudden, cold breeze whipped through her hair, smelling of rain and ancient earth. Her stomach lurched, the sensation of falling upward gripping her lungs. "Open your eyes, my child." The voice was a faint echo. Zainab blinked. She wasn't in the forest. She was standing in the center of her own cramped, dim room in her aunt's house. The familiar scent of her aunt's burnt jollof rice wafted under the door. Her school bag was still slumped on the floor where she had left it that morning. Heart hammering against her ribs, Zainab looked down. The white pot was still in her hands. "It can't be," she whispered. She looked at the clock on the wall. Only 2 hours had passed since she met the woman at the tree, yet she had walked miles into the bush. Trembling, she set the pot on a small wooden table. She thought of her aunt's constant shouting about the unpaid school fees, the looming threat of being kicked out of the house, and the hunger that lived in the corners of their kitchen. She reached out and tapped the rim of the pot once. Twice. 3 times. A soft, golden hum vibrated through the room. Zainab gasped as crisp, new Naira notes began to spill over the sides of the pot like water from a fountain. It didn't stop until a small mountain of wealth sat on her table. Zainab fell to her knees, tears blurring her vision. She wasn't just safe, she was powerful. But as she heard Tracy's voice outside, sharp and mocking as she returned from school to brag about her day, Zainab remembered the warning. This was a secret that could destroy her if it fell into the wrong hands. Within a week, the atmosphere in Aduka village began to shift. It started with the widow at the end of the lane finding an envelope of cash tucked under her door to cover her rent. Then, the local headmaster announced that the school fees for the 10 poorest students had been paid in full by an anonymous friend. Zainab moved through the village like a ghost of her former self. She was still the quiet girl in the faded uniform, but her eyes held a new, calm fire. She paid her aunt's debts through a found stash of her late mother's savings, enduring the woman's suspicious glares. "You're acting strange, Zainab," Tracy said one afternoon, leaning against the school corridor. Tracy's face was twisted in a permanent scowl. She had been punished by Madame Rose despite being on time, a cruel irony that had only sharpened her bitterness. "People are talking. They say you're the one giving out money. Where would a pathetic thing like you get a kobo to spare?" "I'm just lucky, Tracy," Zainab said softly, clutching her books. "Maybe the universe rewards those who look down at the dust instead of just at the clock." "Luck doesn't pay for the headmaster's new roof," Tracy hissed, stepping into Zainab's personal space. "You're hiding something. Or you're selling something you shouldn't be. Don't think I won't find out." Zainab walked away, feeling the cold prickle of fear. She wanted to help everyone, but she could feel the eyes of the village, and the jagged ambition of her former friend, closing in on her secret. The rumors turned toxic. Under Tracy's careful cultivation, the village began to whisper that Zainab had found a sugar daddy in the city. Her aunt, fueled by greed and a lack of control, confronted Zainab in the middle of the compound. "Is this how you repay me?" her aunt screamed, throwing a handful of mud at Zainab's feet. "Bringing shame to this house. Prostituting yourself for these notes you hide under your mattress. I should throw you out to the dogs." Zainab stood silent, her heart breaking. She looked around at the neighbors who were watching, the same neighbors whose children's school fees she had secretly paid. Not one of them spoke up. Not one of them defended her. Tracy stood at the edge of the crowd, a small, triumphant smile playing on her lips. She had successfully stripped Zainab of her dignity, even if she couldn't yet find her gold. In moments like this, when the world turns its back on the very hands that fed it, we are forced to wonder if kindness is a luxury the poor cannot afford. It's hard to stand alone. If you've ever felt the sting of a false rumor or the weight of a friend's betrayal, leave a comment below so we can acknowledge that even in the dark, we aren't truly alone. 2 days later, Tracy appeared at Zainab's door. Her eyes were red, and her voice was uncharacteristically soft. She held a bottle of expensive-looking non-alcoholic wine. "I'm sorry, Zainab," Tracy sobbed, "the performance so perfect it would have fooled a saint. I was jealous. I listened to the gossip and I added to it. I've lost my best friend, and for what? Please, let's drink this and forget the past. I just want us to be sisters again." Zainab, whose deep flaw was a heart that refused to stop loving, let out a shaky breath and opened the door. "I missed you, Tracy. I didn't want it to be like this." They sat in the dim light of Zainab's room. Tracy poured the wine, her hand steady as she ensured Zainab's cup was full. As Zainab drank, a strange heaviness settled over her limbs. The room began to tilt. Tracy's face blurred, her smile widening into something predatory. "Where is it, Zainab?" Tracy's voice sounded like it was coming from the bottom of a well. "The money. The source. Tell me, and I make the sleep go away." "Under the bed." Zainab managed to whisper before her head hit the pillow, the drugged wine plunging her into a dark, helpless void. Tracy didn't hesitate. She scrambled under the bed, her fingers clawing at the dust until they hit the cool, smooth surface of the white pot. She let out a jagged laugh, clutching the vessel to her chest. She didn't check on her sister. She didn't look back. She slipped out into the night, headed for the city lights, leaving Zainab unconscious in the dirt. Tracy arrived in the city of Lagos like a whirlwind of newfound arrogance. She rented a penthouse suite with the first few taps on the pot, the money flowing faster than she could spend it. She bought silk dresses that cost more than a village house. She surrounded herself with friends who laughed at her jokes as long as she was paying for the champagne. "I am the queen now," Tracy shouted from her balcony, throwing handfuls of cash into the wind, watching people scramble in the streets below like ants. She stopped thinking about Aduka. She stopped thinking about the old woman. She used the pot 10, 20, 50 times a day, demanding more gold, more jewels, more power. But the pot was beginning to change. The pristine white ceramic was marring with black, vein-like cracks. Each time she tapped it, the hum was no longer golden. It was a low, guttural growl that made the glass in her room shiver. "Just one more," Tracy muttered, her eyes bloodshot, her hair matted despite the expensive stylist. "Give me 10 million. I want to buy the hotel. I want to buy the world." She tapped the pot 3 times. But this time, no money came out. Instead, a thick, black smoke began to pour from the mouth of the vessel, smelling of sulfur and ancient, rotting firewood. The lights in the penthouse flickered and died. The friends Tracy had bought vanished into the shadows, their laughter replaced by a terrifying, rhythmic drumming that seemed to beat from within the walls themselves. Tracy backed away, her silk dress catching on a chair. From the black smoke, 3 figures emerged. They were masquerades, ancient, towering spirits of justice, draped in raffia and topped with fierce, carved wooden masks. They carried whips made of spirit iron. "You stole the gift of a pure heart," the tallest masquerade boomed, the sound vibrating in Tracy's very marrow. "You took the blessing and turned it into a curse of greed." "No. It's mine. I found it." Tracy screamed, but her voice was a thin, pathetic thing. The masquerades moved with impossible speed. The first strike of the whip didn't draw blood, it drew out her memories. Each lash stripped away a piece of her stolen life. The silk turned to rags. The penthouse turned back into a cold, concrete room. The gold turned to ash. They beat her with the weight of every insult she had thrown at the old woman. They beat her with the weight of the betrayal she had dealt Zainab. "Return to the dust," the spirits commanded. "Go back to the place where you broke your soul and beg for the mercy you never gave." When the smoke cleared, the penthouse was empty. The pot was gone. Tracy lay on the floor of a bus station back in the village, her mind shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. Zainab woke up 2 days after the betrayal to find her room empty. The pot was gone, but strangely, She felt a profound sense of peace. The burden of the secret had been lifted. She expected to return to poverty, but when she looked on her table, the pot was sitting there, clean, white, and silent. It had returned home on its own. A knock came at the door. It wasn't the headmaster or her aunt. It was Tracy. But this wasn't the Tracy Zainab knew. She was dressed in the same torn, blue school uniform from the day of the incident. Her hair was wild, and she was shivering despite the heat. She fell to her knees at Zainab's feet, clawing at the dirt. "I'm sorry, Zainab. The spirits, the whips, they wouldn't stop." Tracy wailed, her eyes darting around as if she still saw the masquerades in the shadows. "Please, take me back. Give me the pot back so I can make it right. I'll be good, I promise." Zainab looked down at her former friend. She felt no anger, only a deep, hollow sadness. She reached down and helped Tracy to her feet, wiping the dirt from her face. "I forgive you, Tracy," Zainab said, her voice firm. "I truly do. The anger is gone." Tracy's eyes lit up with a spark of her old manipulation. "So, we can be sisters again. I can stay here with you." "No," Zainab said, stepping back and closing the door halfway. "I forgive you, but I no longer trust you. You cannot stay in this house, and you cannot be in my life. Forgiveness is for my peace, but boundaries are for my safety. Go, Tracy. Find your own path. I hope it leads you to a better heart." We often think that being a good person means letting people walk over us again and again. But Zainab's strength shows us that the ultimate form of self-love is knowing when to say no to a toxic cycle. As we approach the final chapter of Zainab's transformation, I want to thank you for honoring her story with your attention. If you found value in this lesson of karma and kindness, please consider sharing this story with someone who needs to hear it. True to the old woman's word, Zainab's life transformed into a blessing that required no magic pot. Her reputation was restored when the widow and the headmaster finally spoke up, shamed by Zainab's continued grace despite their silence. A month later, the royal prince of the region visited Aduka. He wasn't looking for a girl with the most gold, he was looking for the woman whose kindness had sustained a village through a hard winter. When he met Zainab, he didn't see a village girl, he saw a queen who had already mastered her own heart. Their wedding was the largest the red earth of Aduka had ever seen. Zainab walked to the palace not as a girl running from a school bell, but as a woman walking toward her throne. As the wedding procession passed the big Ioko tree, a chilling sound drifted from the bushes. It was the sound of a woman laughing and crying, a rhythmic, broken chant about school bells and white pots. Tracy had refused to seek help, her mind consumed by the darkness she had invited in. She had gone to a native doctor to seek a charm to destroy Zainab's happiness, but she had failed the final test. She had looked back when the spirits warned her not to. Now, she lived in the thicket, a madwoman wandering the same path Zainab had once walked with the firewood. Zainab paused the procession for a moment. She looked into the dark green of the bush. She didn't feel triumph. She simply whispered a prayer for the girl she used to know. The carriage moved on. The sun set over Aduka, casting long, golden shadows over the red earth. The white pot sat on a pedestal in Zainab's new home, not as a source of wealth, for she had all she needed in the love of her people, but as a reminder that while the world may judge you by your status, the universe only cares about the weight you are willing to carry for someone else. Karma is not a punishment, it is a mirror. And Zainab's mirror reflected a soul of pure gold.